Hey guys, welcome to the Up Next podcast, where we are interviewing teen entrepreneurs that are making it big time in the startup world. We are asking the questions we know you want to hear. Up Next is an app made for teens where anyone can join or build a real life startup. So today we have Capri Wheaton, age 19, from California. She is the co-founder of Thrift, which is pretty much Shopify for Instagram sellers.
How did you find yourself creating such a business? What sparked the idea?
We definitely did not know our idea would work. Actually, for context, the idea we're working on right now, we launched 6 weeks ago, but for the past year, we've actually been sort of testing out different ideas that we had. So our first idea, when COVID hit and a bunch of small businesses were failing, we aimed to digitize brick and mortar secondhand stores. So that's what we were first working on. And then, it was kind of a logistical nightmare and we didn't feel well equipped to run that business. So then we pivoted to a marketplace for online secondhand sellers. And then most recently, we pivoted to this idea. So I think my answer is we have no idea what we're doing. We're just trying to stay close to our customers, rapidly test, and come up with a lot of hypotheses that we can see if are true or not.
Who do you consider your first mentor? What did they help you go through?
I would say our first mentors are really Charles Huang, the co-founder of Guitar Hero, and Umair Khan. So they were our professors in our entrepreneurship class at UC Berkeley. That's where I met my co-founder, and that's where, my co-founder Sam already kind of knew about the startup scene because his mom is an entrepreneur. But for me, I'm from a small town. I had no idea what startups were. I knew nothing about the tech scene. So that class was really a crash course for me and opened my eyes. And from there, we just started going to office hours every single time we could. We stayed for the entire time, just talking to them. And they really guided us through the entire process of creating a startup. That was kind of the thesis of the class that they taught, but we definitely took it a step further with them. And then by the end of, or nearing the end of the class, we kept joking like, oh, you guys are going to drop out and do the startup. And then funny enough, we dropped out to do the startup. So that's kind of where it all started. And we're really grateful for them.
How much time did it take for you to build the product that you launched?
Yeah, so the first idea we launched was a marketplace. And so we actually had to have two apps for that. So we had an app for our sellers and our app for our buyers, or a consumer facing app, as well as a website as well where you could shop products. So that was a lot of building. It took a very long time. We had a basic MVP up, in a decent amount of time. I honestly don't remember to be the exact time frame, but I know that one took a lot longer because when you're building multiple apps and a website, that's pretty heavy. However, the transition to what we're doing now wasn't that bad. I would say we built out the MVP in about 2 to 3 days. And the reason why was because when we built the marketplace, we spent a lot of time on our checkout flow. And now the checkout flow is a massive part of what we do. So having spent the time on that, we can kind of recycle a lot of the same technology we already built. And so that made it a lot easier to transition to a new idea.
How much money was needed to build your first version?
So, I can speak very well to this because we did not have any money. I did not have any money. And so because we were dealing, with payments and taxes and all of these things, we first knew that we kind of needed to incorporate the business. I believe, the company that we're using for payment processing actually needed to have those legal documents for us to even sign up to be able to process payments, which I think is pretty typical. So if you're doing anything in that space, that is a huge financial barrier that you do need to be incorporated. I would say for us, I think we used Clerky, but because we incorporated in Delaware, I would say it's around $1,000. I would prepare for more in case anything comes up, but then you also have to pay for your shares and a lot of things on top of that. So that process alone, I would say around a couple $1,000, depending on how you do it. And then at first, to sort of seed the supply, we were actually going out buying clothes and reselling them on our marketplace just to drum up some demand. And so that was pretty expensive because we'd go out and we'd essentially do bulk reselling. So we'd spend like $500 on clothes or something and then resell it. So we ran all of those kind of micro experiments to try and figure out what we're doing, figure out if there was demand. And I would say that's very expensive in the beginning, is like, yes, there are a lot of hacky solutions, but there are also a lot of things that just take a lot of money. We were running ads on the marketplace. That was pretty expensive. For context, we were actually fully bootstrapped. I would say half of the way through the Y Combinator batch. So after we dropped out, there's a period of time where we were bootstrapping, then we got into Y Combinator, and then it took a while for that first funding to close. So for a month and a half, 2 months, we were still fully bootstrapped. So before YC, I was actually nannying part-time. And then in all my free time, I was working on the startup. But basically all the money I got from nannying and babysitting and these little side gigs was just all going to the startup. And my co-founder, Sam, used his savings as well. So, I mean, I would say if you're able to get, a really great part-time job, I feel like I was very lucky. Then that's an easy way to kind of like, bootstrap and while doing a little bit of work. It's not ideal, but I mean, I had no money. So in order to like get things going, I had to make a little bit of money to kind of seed everything.
How did you get those first users, customers to come aboard? What was that like?
Well, for the marketplace, we did a lot of paid ads and social media marketing. We also worked with some influencers. But for what we're doing now, which is the software infrastructure for people selling on Instagram, it's been a mixture of cold outreach, referrals, and organic word of mouth.
What is one time you experienced a real fail moment? Just, everything went wrong. Did you fix it? Were you able to? Did you learn from it? What happened?
One mistake that I would avoid. It's really hard to say. I mean, we've made so many mistakes throughout this process, and I know this is like not what anyone wants to hear, but you kind of have to go through that. And I think we were kind of seeing, our mentors were kind of letting us go through, and do all these stupid things. And I think that was really good for us because we failed so many times. We've, tried so many dumb experiments in hindsight, but now it's like we feel so much more equipped and prepared for everything that comes up because we've been through so many things and we've tried so many mini experiments and big experiments that have just totally failed. And I think that's been very valuable for us. And we're very committed to the process. And I think, unfortunately, when you're starting anything, part of the process is that there are going to be very many very hard times that you're going to have to go through, just like mentally. And then, with the product not working out, or, you're really excited about running this one experiment you think is going to work and it totally fails, or you're excited to launch a new product and it gets no traction and you feel horrible. Like those are all things, unfortunately, that are just going to be, part of the startup process. And so we've been through all of that. So failure is a good thing. Hopefully it works out for us, right?
What are 3 traits that you look for in a co-founder, business partner type of person?
I would say I think the number one thing is someone who's very, very open and honest, and, someone who you communicate well with. I think that's been such a blessing. That Sam and I communicate really well together, which is good because we kind of, to be honest, took a huge risk because we didn't really know each other that well before we launched the startup together. But over time we really developed really strong communication skills, and as we got to know each other better, like now we're very, very open and honest with each other. Which I think just helps everyone. We don't like to sugarcoat anything. We're very direct about our feelings. And I think that's the most helpful thing, is just to get everything out on the table because, startups are hard. Everyone is making mistakes. It's very complicated. And so just kind of being able to have someone where you feel like you can always tell them how you're feeling, and you can, feel free to give feedback, and then also you can accept their feedback and, feel like they can tell you how they're honestly feeling. I think that relationship is the number one. Um, I would say, definitely someone who's like hacky and creative as well. That's also been really cool, is that we're both really into, facing a problem and thinking about, okay, instead of, throwing money at this problem, or, figuring, or, going about it the conventional way, like, how can we hack this problem? How can we go around it? How can we, I mean, we've done multiple things like that, we've done web scraping to see the supply. We bought clothes and resold them to see the supply. Things like that can be very helpful because, sometimes those little hacks that you do just work. And yeah, we've seen that with a lot of startups before. So it's good to like be really creative with it.
Could you name one advantage and one disadvantage of being such a young entrepreneur?
I would say, starting off with the disadvantages first, I think it can be hard for people to take you seriously, and it can be hard to convey your level of commitment. And I think this was, one concern that was raised when we were, going through the Y Combinator application process. And it's also, a concern I can see with a lot of investors, right? They're like, why should we put so much money into, a 19-year-old? From their perspective, they're like, oh, they're young, they're just trying this thing out, maybe they don't really know what they're doing. And so on their part, I can see how it would seem a lot more risky to potentially fund a younger founder, and not really knowing their levels of commitment. So I totally get it, but from our perspective, it is, sometimes a lot harder to really convey to people how passionate we are about solving the problem, how committed we are to the startup process in general, and that we're not just gonna, one day decide to kind of, give up and do something else. So, yeah, I think that's been a little bit of a disadvantage, but I think the strengths kind of outnumber that. Being a young entrepreneur, it feels very fun. I mean, I feel like as young people, we're like so blessed to be able to do this process now because we don't have a family, we don't have mortgages. We can basically we just need to feed ourselves essentially, and then we're good. So that gives us a lot more freedom, to do the startup. So that's definitely a major blessing. And we can, have, the freedom to really like have fun with this process and run these experiments and know that everything is going to be okay. So I think that's, yeah. And then I think, yeah, we're very hacky and creative as well. And I think that comes with a lack of experience in the industry because, even with startups, there are all these playbooks and people, tell you how you should be thinking about things and how you should be, running your business. But for us, it's like, well, we don't really know any of the technicalities and the strategy behind it. And that's a huge advantage because we're not going to be thinking in terms of, technique, or we're not going to be thinking inside this one box. We're just going to be, thinking, okay, what do we think is right? What are our guts telling us? And, what are some creative ways we can get around this problem?
What is a tech tool that you just can't go without? Maybe an app or a website, something that you always use?
I would say that's a question for my technical co-founder. Let me ask him and get back to you. Because I would definitely be, I'm assuming, a developer tool. Ours is kind of, we built, a lot of different technologies, but I'm sure there are, some things that have been pretty core to like, how he builds things. I would say for me personally, Retool and Amplitude have been pretty useful. Retool, I can see, all the new users signing up and then go and talk to them. So that's been very helpful. Amplitude for, data and analytics is very helpful. So those would be my two.
Which entrepreneurs inspire you the most these days? Who do you have your eye on?
Yeah, I mean, So many of the YC founders in our batch that we've gotten to know are so inspiring because we're kind of there in the process with them. We see them growing every single week, and some of the stuff that people are working on in the batch is just mind blowing. And these people are so smart, so creative, and so dedicated. It just blows my mind all the time. So I would say like pretty much everyone I've interacted with in our batch so far, and in our like little section group as well. Just awesome people. Um, I would say, other than that, I think Barbara Corcoran has always really inspired me. Um, I watched this, I think it was on YouTube, about, how she created company culture. And I think that really resonated with me because, hopefully we can get this to a point where, we can hire other people and build this out into a real business. And then the goal is really to be somewhere where people really want to work and to have an environment of, fun, open communication, and yes, lots of hard work, obviously, but, somewhere where people, feel comfortable and really want to work. I think that would be my goal as an entrepreneur as I kind of build this company.
Which trait of yours do you feel is your weakest and you need to outsource it somehow with a coworker or maybe a tech platform?
Yeah, I would say I think my co-founder and I both resonate that we're really not skilled marketers. So I think that's something we're currently working on outsourcing, and maybe bringing, a third team member on. We're great with coming up with these kind of like hacky marketing scenes, if you will, like experiments, like, oh, let's like run this ad in kind of a creative way that's not, not directly on a product, but gets people to our product. Those types of things, I think we're pretty good with coming up with. But in general, I think that's, a huge gap in our skill sets that we're kind of looking to fill. And we've been, constantly trying to educate ourselves, but definitely, looking to bring another person onto our team for that as well.
How important do you feel it is for young entrepreneurs to think about social change when creating a business?
Yeah, I think it's massive because it gives us kind of like an underlying cause that drives us. Our core cause has always been, sustainable fashion and thrifting. Even though, our software obviously will expand to all, different types of items. Our first focus is people selling secondhand clothing on Instagram, and our first two major ideas were both marketplaces for secondhand clothing. So that kind of same theme of sustainability has kind of been driving us. And now it's really, that we can sort of empower micro to small businesses to sell more easily through Instagram, and by giving them insights into their customers, and giving them an easier process, we can help them make more money. So that's kind of, another huge cause that's kind of always been driving us as well. So I think if you can build a business around things you're passionate about, it makes it a lot easier, and it also gives you a lot of direction. Because, even though you're pivoting around, if you choose kind of one vertical of like, okay, I'm really passionate about, let's say, destigmatizing mental health. Well, there are like so many startups you can do within that vertical, and so many, adjacent things you can do. Maybe they're not like directly related, but indirectly you can have some impact. I think that's a great way to go about it. It gives you a lot of direction, and you're going to be more dedicated to solving all the problems that come up because you're dedicated to, your vision or your goal.
If you could have any superpower in the world, what would you pick?
Probably the ability to read minds. I think it'd be so helpful in meetings with investors where you can't really read them all the time. Um, yeah, I think that would be a massive advantage. And also customers as well. You know what they're thinking, and then you can sell to them better.
Thank you so much for your time.